Hi-ho there, it's me again. I'm doing a recording of yet another, and possibly the last for a little while, Gazetteer review. In this case, this will be the Gazetteer number 13, The Shadow Elves. Now, the Shadow Elves is an interesting choice. It's the last of the so-called racial gazetteers. They had the elf one and the dwarf one and the halfling one, and they even had the sort of quote-unquote humanoids one, the orcs, goblins, and what have you. And the rest are mainly human. Though they have the other races in those nations, those were the ones that were, these are racial nations, which is a weird idea to begin with, but sort of makes sense if you're using a Tolkienian model of fantasy world building. But this is the Shadow Elves. Now, first thing you're going to think about Shadow Elves is these are the the drow. Yeah, you're going to expect them to be dark elves. They're not, but I can see where you would get the impression that they were, because it's just the Mistara version of dark elves. They have dark elves in all those worlds. I'm sure that's why I'm going to toss that over there, so it'll stop making that noise quite so close to the mic. Yeah. Anyway. I can certain that you have seen the various versions of drow that they have in the various D&D worlds. Clearly, the most famous D&D character out there right now, as an iconic character, is Dris Do'Urden. So, yeah, the drow are a big thing, but these are not drow. These guys are more like more like the elves from Hellboy 2. The white-skinned, pale. That's much, because these guys are pale-skinned, and that's not the only difference. About the only thing that these share in common with drow is that they really don't like the surface world. And they live underground. That's about it. The culture is largely not evil. It is not a strict matriarchy. Like I said, their skin is not black. They don't worship Lolth, or traffic with demons or anything like that. So yeah, they're much different from the drow in the Forgotten Realms sense, and some of the other settings that have had drow. They also don't get any racial superpowers. They're not casting darkness or anything like that. And I think that the pale skin sort of makes more sense for an underground race, because they don't spend time in the sunlight to build up the things in your skin that makes it darker. So, anyways, let's get into the specifics. It was written by Carl Sargent and Gary Thomas. I don't actually have a lot of information on these guys. I think for one of them, this is the only D&D book they wrote. But other than that, I don't have a lot of information on them. It's separated into two parts, like most of the Gazetteers. So here's a minor pet peeve of mine: the PDF. You can buy the PDF from D&D Classics or RPG Now or whatever your place of preference to buy it is. And when they release the PDF, and they've done this with most of the Gazetteers, they put them in the wrong order. They put the Game Master book first and the Player's Handbook second. And the player's handbook and the text in the books themselves say, read the player's book first. But, for some reason, they keep putting the Game Master section first, despite the fact that the text tells you not to do that. So that's really kind of annoying, but what are you going to do? It's a pet peeve. I wish they'd fix it. There are a number of things I wish they'd do. That's one of the things I wish they'd fix. So I'm going to go ahead and get this in the order that they intend you to go in. The player section first starts with basic setting expectations, describing the world that they live in, which is underground. It starts to get into player perspective. Like it has some in-character perspective of the Shadow Elves and talks about their history and Raphael, who is very important to them. Raphael is essentially their god. It's an immortal that they follow, and it introduces the harshness of Shadow Elf society. While they are not evil, they are harsh. It's a priest telling a story while it's abandoning a deformed child in a cave far from their home to be taken by the wild, eaten by goblins, something like that. And, that's the harshness of their society. They do not allow for deformity in their society. Any kind of infirmity or deformity is verboten. They get rid of it. It's not unlike what you saw in the movie 300 about the Spartans, where oh, you're deformed. Sorry, it's sad. We're going to get rid of the child now. Then it goes on to give some more general history. The elves that become the Shadow Elves started out as a wandering band in the time of Blackmoor. And they were wandering away from Blackmoor and the Reign of Fire, which is the big apocalyptic event in the prehistory of Mystara, happens, and they get driven underground, and they end up in the Broken Lands. And they went through a few things, a few trials. I'll get into that in the GM section because it goes into more details. And then, they eventually find the teachings of Raphael in the Refuge of Stone, which gives them 14 principles that are as a guiding light to their lives, how to live their lives and be, who they become. Now, it talks about the largest city in the heart of the Shadow Elf nation. There are a few other cities, but this is the most important. It's where the Refuge of Stone is. It's the temple that the shamans use is there. It's called the City of Stars. Now, the City of Stars is a neat idea. It's a really huge cavern underground. And halfway up to the ceiling, the gravity reverses. So, you've got part of the city above and part of the city below. And the reason they call it the City of Stars is that when you're on one side, you can look up and see the lights from the other side like they're stars. It's kind of a neat idea. Now, they describe some of the lesser cities, but not in a lot of detail, and they don't need to. They give you just enough to go, these guys are known for growing slug meat, because that's what they eat, giant slugs and mushrooms and stuff. Let's see. They have, they talk about the connective tissue of their civilization, which is the tunnel system, which is very broad and wide, and there's lots of it. Then they get into some in-character vignettes. These are like little snippets of stories told in character about, well, semi-in character. They're basically stories of little pieces of life. Like, here's a guy out on patrol, and here's a shaman working in the temple, and here's a family waiting for a child to be born, and that kind of thing. And it switches back and forth. And it's actually a really enjoyable bit. I really liked it. I mean, as a story that stands on its own, it's not quite there, but it's good enough that I just enjoyed reading that section. Then they get into talking about shamans. Now, shamans are kind of like clerics, I guess. They are not direct analogs to clerics, but they're close. They carry these soul crystals that enhance their abilities, and the soul crystals are supposed to hold the souls of Shadow Elves that have not been born yet, or have been born and are waiting to be reborn. And they use the power from these crystals to enhance their magic. To become a shaman, you don't decide to. It is the only deformity that they allow is a mark on the face that indicates that they are their shaman. And they are taken away from the parents and raised by the other shamans to be a shaman. So, it's got that. Shadow Elves are, in this setting, essentially the same as normal elves. They have a few minor differences. They got a huge infravision, 90-foot infravision, and they cannot be paralyzed by ghouls or undead. Though other types of paralysis work. They don't get the nifty levitation or casting darkness or anything like that from some of the previous versions of Drow. They are, essentially elves. And elves in this setting are sort of half fighter, half mage. They get fighting skills and they get mage skills. The shaman sort of is an alternate XP expenditure. Your other classes don't rise. You just direct some of your XP towards your shaman levels, and you follow the shaman progression, but the other parts don't get better. So you're going broad. You don't get a lot more health, for instance, or anything like that. Your saves don't get that much better or anything like that. But you're getting not only the magic that you get as a magic using elf, but you also get the sort of cleric style shamanic powers. It's more like an earth power version of clerics, I guess, because there are some lava breathing and things like that. So it seems like their powers are strongly tied to the earth. And again, they have some powers tied to the soul crystals, but that is more talked about in the DM's guide. They got rolls for skills, like pretty much all of the Gazetteers do. And, the players, that's pretty much the player section. They've got a section where this is what everybody knows about the Shadow Elves, which is sort of told from outsider's standpoint. It's fairly common for most of the Gazetteers. The DM's guide. Now, here there are many, many sort of secret details. First, talks about the real history of the Shadow Elves. It's similar to the one described in the player section with some notable additions. After the elves found their way into the underground beneath the Broken Lands, but before they became followers of Raphael, they briefly settled in another city. The city was built by a people similar to the Aztecs, and those people show up in the Hollow World supplements later on. I'll get to that in a sec. But they found an evil immortal there named Azantiel, who really, even the name is kind of Egyptian, or not Egyptian, Aztec-esque in how they spell it. And at first he liked the Shadow Elves. He was like, I've got people and they're smart and powerful. But he didn't like them because they didn't breed fast enough. Why is that important? Well, he's kind of a blood god. He likes blood. He likes blood sacrifices. And if they killed each other enough to satisfy his bloodlust, well, they die out. They don't breed fast enough to replenish their numbers. So, and they're, kind of willful and smart, and they began to realize they were getting manipulated. So he drove them out of that city, caused lava flows and sulfur to show up, and drove them out of the city. And eventually the city was given over to the orcs, which is back in the Orcs of Thar book. It's that city that's surrounded by lava and has the evil god in it. That's it. The Shadow Elves showed up there first, and he went, no, you're not enough, and sent him off. So they went deeper. And when they went deeper is when they found the Refuge of Stone. Now, they eventually, following those tenets of the Refuge of Stone, the 14 rules that Raphael left them, what led them to being basically a neutral nation. Yes, there are some evil members, and yes, there are some good members, and it's a bit like any other place. Ambition and such can cause some evil things to happen, but it's, not a terrible thing. It's not a terrible place. They often take prisoners rather than kill people, and they don't let them go back because then people would know where they are. If they find somebody wandering around, they take them prisoner, and they basically put them in a colony and say, hey, you can live like us. We'll make you part of our society, which is very in contrast to some of the more evil versions of Drow over the years. Now, many years ago, they did actually try and return to the surface world. They tried a few times. Sunlight is not their friend, so they thought it was unlivable until they came across some elves exploring underground, and they found out that Alfheim was a thing, that there was an elven nation on the surface, and the surface was livable, and there was this nation of their people, the people that they were tied to, alive up on the surface. So they went to them. They went up and were like, hi, we're your lost cousins. We're your pals. We are going to come live with you guys. Won't that be great? And at first, the elves in Alfheim were like, yeah, that'll be awesome. And then they realized how many Shadow Elves there were, and that the Shadow Elves demanded to have, half the land and all of this stuff, and they went, it's a little less than awesome. Maybe you should go away now. And they drove them off. And several times they have tried to take Alfheim away from the elves that are there since then, and haven't succeeded, but they're still trying. So, that's definitely a source of tension between them and the surface elves. So, let's get into the soul crystals. And the soul crystals are not what they appear. Raphael is an immortal of energy, and he planted these crystals to claim radiance, which is a magical version of radiation that they talk about in the Gazetteer, Gazetteer. The radiance is coming from the buried alien spacecraft engine underneath Gazetteer. It's like 10,000 feet beneath the country, and it's leaking this radiation, and it becomes a magical force. And these crystals absorb that energy. And the powers that the shamans draw on is this radiance. The Gazetteer talks about some of their high magic involving radiance. This is the same energy. Now, normally radiance, and no, it has nothing to do with the souls of elves in there. There are no elves in the crystals. It's just, the story they tell, and only the top end of the shamans actually know the truth. Most of the rank and file don't know that they're not using the souls of elves to strengthen their power or anything. Anyways, when you're using radiance, it normally has like a 1% chance of causing damage to your body, not unlike radiation. It's unhealable. You'll basically rot to death. But if you use the crystals, you don't. It prevents that. But what it does cause is it sort of redirects the damage out, which is why deformity is a thing for the Shadow Elves. They have a higher birth rate than the surface elves, but a large portion of their, a sizable portion anyway, of their population gets born deformed, and they are put out to die. And that deformity is because of this radiance energy, this basically radiation mutating them. And Raphael commanded that they be put out, so they're put out. And because they're put out so far, no one actually gets a chance to study them to find out, like, about them and why they keep being born deformed. So this is why a lot of people don't notice what's been going on. Now, there's it's a more detailed write-up of the religion of the shamans, what they believe, what they do, how they're indoctrinated, and all of that. There's some more details about geography in the GM section, more details about the City of Stars, different sections, major NPCs, things like that. Some details on the armies and spies of the Shadow Elves. The spies are interesting. They have sort of a strangely Aztec kind of taste to them. So it's like they intended to tie that back to the evil god, and they just never got around to it. But anyways, they're because they're lived by the feathered serpent, and yeah, it's a thing. They've got more of an Aztec feel to the spy group, actually. Let me see. Look at the notes. Ah, yes. They do have some details on major NPCs, kings, high priests, that kind of thing. They also have a write-up about Raphael and how he became an immortal. Turns out, Raphael started in Blackmore as a nuclear physicist. He studied the range of physics that sort of bordered up onto magic. And apparently his studies and his experiments and such made it so that when the Rain of Fire happened, he survived by becoming an immortal. It sort of converted him to a bodiless state where he was, this being of energy. And he eventually found the Shadow Elves and helped them along, and their belief in him helped him along. So it sort of, balances out a bit. Now, there are some details about their interactions with the surface world. Those spies go everywhere because intrigue is always entertaining. They also talk about, very briefly, like half a page, of a place called the Lands of the Red Sun, which is another name for the lands in the Hollow World supplement. And they even say you'll be able to get more details about this from the Hollow World supplements that will be coming out soon. Hollow World, I believe, had a box set, and it is kind of what it says. It's the world inside Mystara. And I don't have a lot of details about that right now, because I don't have those books. They are not available on the classics, and I never read them when they were out. I saw them and thought, well, they look, I don't know, and just never got around to pick them up. And turns out that they were related to Mystara, and I probably should have, but at the time I didn't realize that. So, I will try and get a hold of some of them, but, at this point it's out of print and it's not available by any legal PDF source, so that may take me a bit. Just going to say that up front. They do some guidance on running campaigns in the setting. There are a couple of adventure outlines, very much like the other Gazetteers in that way. So, what's my overall impressions of this Gazetteer? I like it. I like their handling of of an alternate version of Elven culture. I always enjoy some of those more off-case elves where they're not just sort of Tolkienian in their presentation. And Drow get overdone, and this isn't Drow, so it's something else. It's off to the side. Like the Drow and Eberron are fascinating to me because they're a little bit something else. The elves from Athos are, very much something else. They are not your typical explanation of elves. So it's interesting to see that other possible presentation, and I liked that aspect of this. I liked that they went into detail about the actual belief systems of their priesthood. There's some bits that I don't know that didn't really work for me. There are some sections where the authors clearly expressed there was a correct way to run things and an incorrect way to run things. Where they talk about, well, if you have characters that want to steal from these people, clearly you need to get rid of those players. And, I kind of get that there's something different between saying this isn't really the kind of games I like, and saying you shouldn't do that because it's wrong. And there's a few points in the book where the authors say, well, you shouldn't do that because it's wrong. So I feel like they lose some points on that front, but overall I enjoyed this Gazetteer. I think it's worth buying. The world they present is fascinating, and it looks like a place that you could really sink your teeth into on adventuring. And it's I think it's one of the better Gazetteers, with the proviso that they add some little bits there that are just kind of, why did you feel compelled to say this? But now, as to future Gazetteers, I am currently looking to try and get a hold of the physical copies of the Gazetteers and Hollow World stuff, and I will continue to be doing those. But it may take me a while. Not that it didn't take me a while anyway, because I'm a slacker, but you get my meaning. They are not available normally, and that's the thing. But that said, I will keep doing those and still keep looking into the Mystara setting. There are a number of online sources, Vaults of Pandion, Threshold Magazine, things like that, and there's an atlas of Mystara where this map maker guy is going through all the maps from the various sets and such, and trying to make a proper atlas on his website. And I'll include a link. It's kind of cool to see the work he's done. But if you're interested in doing a Mystara setting, there's enough material out there now that if you wanted to do that in 5th edition, it wouldn't be hard. Not everything's out, but it's a bit like the 5th edition version of Forgotten Realms. They concentrate on one small section of their world, and they have a huge world to work with in Forgotten Realms that they don't present all the information there. But you could, track them down and pull all that information from older books and such, and run games in those other portions of the world. I think Mystara is like that with 5th edition. And, as far as the older rule set, the classic Metzger D&D, it's playable. It has some odd artifacts that maybe are less comfortable to deal with now, just because we've moved on from some of these kinds of mechanics. But, if you're comfortable with dealing with those older rule sets, it's certainly playable. So, like I said, I'll keep going. I'll keep looking for more Mystara material to sort of plug in. But I think this will be the last of the Gazetteers for a while. There are only 2 more, to be honest. There's Ataquan clans and the box set that they did for Thyatis and Alphatia. And then after that, you got some Hollow World stuff, but they're not listed as Gazetteers. It's a different format for a lot of those. So, I don't have a lot more of them to go through. That's what I'm saying. But there's a lot more Mystara to dig into if you're interested. Anyway, thank you for watching. Please support the show, share it. I'm doing my best to put more content out. And I'm mainly working on the weekends these days, because the weekdays, I have a day job. But I'll try and put out some weekday episodes as well this year, maybe some more vlogs. But the larger content, things like this, and the Let's Plays and things like that will be produced and released on the weekends generally. That may change, but that's how it looks at least for the time being. But like I said, subscribe, like, share with all the people, and have a good day. And be safe out there. See ya.